Maybe the real fortune for these siblings is getting family therapy. Today, I'm going to be answering the questions for the mid-year freakout tag or the mid-year check-in tag, however you want to name it. It's basically a series of questions for people in the book community to just do like a check-in in the middle of the year, to look back on what books that they have read and look forward to what books that they need to read before the year ends. I know that this is a little bit early before mid-year because it's like technically early June, but I just wanted to do it. And I feel like I'm not doing too bad with my book progress this year either, because I've looked at my personal reading spreadsheet, which I do go over in the end of the year, but so far, as of filming this, I have read 45 books. So we'll dive into some of the standouts that I had read, as well as so many of the others that I'm very excited to check out. There's still so many new releases that I haven't even talked about in my channel yet. I think another activity that goes along with those lines that you can pair with reading is actually wearing a face mask and getting extra comfortable. So that's why I'm glad that Foreo is sponsoring today's video. Specifically, I want to talk about their product, the FAQ 202. It's basically a silicone LED face mask. And you would think that with the way that it looks on the box, it would be some heavy sci-fi mask that you put on. But I actually found that it was pretty lightweight, and the silicone is very easy to fit onto any face shape. It's got 8 different wavelengths, including NIR, and it basically helps tackle signs of aging and other skin concerns. I like that it reduces the redness on my face and minimizes my pores. But also from an aesthetic standpoint, it does make my skin look smoother and feel softer. And if you would like to try it out with me, I do have a 30% off code. Click on the link in my description and use my code WCindy30 for an extra 30% off of Foreo products. Even the items that already have a discount, you can get that extra 30% off to stack on top of that. And now let's dive into the mid-year check-in tag. The first question is best book that you've read so far this year. And this is something that I had mentioned in my previous video, in my wrap-up, where the book that I have really enjoyed has been The Dream Hotel. This was actually longlisted for Women's Prize for Fiction this year because it came out a few months ago, and I picked it up because the premise just sounded so intriguing. A lot of people compared it to this one anime called Psycho-Pass and this other movie that Tom Cruise has been in. So I do think it has been like a plot that's been done before. I haven't checked out those other media yet, so my only frame of reference has been this book. But I do think that compared to my previous experience reading like other literary books that tend to be more abstract and vague and more like about the vibes rather than the plot, I just really appreciated how this book took this interesting premise and actually expanded upon how the system would work and like the everyday life that the main character has, being stuck in this facility that they put her in because they suspect her of being a future murderer of her husband. Because this is a world where basically in a futuristic America, they have created a system to help mitigate against like mass shootings and suicides and other violent crimes by taking in a bunch of data from people and their social media history and their text messages and other forms of communication, even to the point of like having this technology that records your dreams. Like obviously they're using this for their own purposes so that they can control you, but externally for marketing, they say that it is to help make your life more easy and convenient, something that is already happening today in our world. And so I just really appreciate how a lot of what was happening and what was being explored was so relevant. The second question is a best sequel / series continuation that you've read so far this year. I don't typically read series, but the one that I can bring up for this question would be rereading this manga series called A Sign of Affection. The reason why I reread this series is because Victoria got really into the anime adaptation, and I wanted to introduce her the manga that it was originally adapted from. It's basically a love story between a college student who is deaf and another college student who is a very frequent traveler, very well cultured, and when he meets her, he is so fascinated by the way that she lives and navigates the world that he wants to learn sign language in order to communicate with her and learn even more about her. She similarly wants to learn from his world and his experiences as well from his travels. And it's just a really cute, sweet story about them dating and learning more about each other. And while the anime is accurate to the manga, obviously because the anime is only one season, we only get so much. So the nice thing is that the manga shows more content that you didn't get to see from the anime. You just get way more couple moments between them, and you see their relationship progress more and more. And obviously one of the biggest highlights of the series is that this guy is so fucking hot. He's literally the hottest anime man that could ever exist. And so what's really nice about the manga series is that you get to see more vulnerability in him. There's like things that he's worried about and concerned about in their relationship, but then because they are a healthy couple, they talk that shit out. Funny how they can literally talk to each other without using like vocal speech, and they can communicate better than actual real life couples that vocally speak to each other. I am now going to combine the next two questions from this tag, because the third question is new release you haven't read yet but want to, and the fourth question is most anticipated release. I don't really hold myself too strictly on releases that I need to read by the end of the year, but I do think that this question is a fun opportunity to look at new releases that I would like to read at some point. It doesn't have to be this year, and who knows, maybe I will just drop it if I'm not feeling it, but they're definitely like on my radar once they become available to me. So I looked at my holds in my library right now, and these are the new releases that I haven't talked about previously on my channel. First one is Gifted and Talented. This is about three siblings who are dealing with the death of their father. Not only are these three siblings gifted, they also have telepathic powers and electrokinetically gifted abilities, whatever that means. So there's Meredith, who's the eldest daughter. She is the head of her own biotech company, and she has recently cured mental illness. But apparently she has a journalist ex-boyfriend who is trying to expose her to being a fraud. So that's her incentive with trying to get her father's fortune. And then there's Arthur, who is the second youngest congressman in history, but he's currently losing his re-election campaign and his wife might be leaving him. So his incentive for getting his father's approval is that he will be able to turn this sinking ship around. And then the third child is a woman who was once the world's most famous ballerina. She's now just like a regular marketing executive at her father's company because she dealt with an injury that ended her ballerina career. So she is like not as prestigious or has as many accolades as her other siblings, but if her father has left her everything, then it would be a way to validate her worth. And so I suspect this book is going to be about the three of them competing for their father's fortune or approval or something of that nature. And I'm sure that it will be very juicy and that probably maybe no one will win in the end. Maybe the real fortune for these siblings is getting family therapy. I also have on hold a slow burn romantasy called Behooved, and this is about a noble woman with a chronic illness and a prince who would rather be in a library than serving as a king. How they get together is basically the main girl agrees to marry him because it's a way to kind of like mitigate the threat of war that's happening. However, the prince that she's supposed to marry to is very cold and aloof and seemingly hates her on sight. There is an assassination attempt on their wedding night, which magically transforms the prince into a horse. The way that it works is that he only becomes a human when sunset happens. But obviously they gotta figure out, why was there an assassination attempt? What is the bigger plot afoot here? Also, another awkward thing, she is being framed for his assassination attempt. So she's gotta like deal with clearing her name while also trying to figure out how to saddle a husband who is a horse by day and a hot man by night. And then last book to answer this question is The Knight and the Moth. This is a romantasy about a prophetess who has been having like these vivid dreams about some bad shit that's about to happen. So that makes a bunch of people travel all over across the kingdom just so that they can learn more about her dreams and learn more about their futures. The inciting incident for this book is that a mysterious knight shows up at the cathedral. She ends up having to get his help when other diviners like her are starting to mysteriously vanish one by one. And so the two of them have to work together because the cathedral that has like all these diviners, like there's something going on, because why are these people dropping like flies and just poofing out of nowhere? Because I am a shallow bitch, I just think that the cover is gorgeous, and that was really the main reason why I added it to my list. The fifth question on the tag is biggest disappointing read. There's a book called Pen Pal, which I basically discovered in like the book talk section of the bookstore. So allegedly this book was like a hit on Book Talk. I wouldn't know because I try to stay away from that place. But Pen Pal, at least according to like the premise, was this romance about this woman who recently became a widow. She lost her husband. She's grieving over him. him, but like the day that she comes back from his funeral, she gets this mysterious letter from a man who is in prison, and he seems to know her, and he also is like speaking very intensely in the letters, like he is gonna find her and like reunite with her or some shit like that, even though she doesn't recognize his name or know him at all. And so I picked it up because I thought that this was like some weird Luigi Mangione fanfic or some shit like that. I thought I would make, you know, a silly little roast video about it, but the book turned out to be so weird in a way where like I don't even know if I could make a roast video about it, because it's just like bizarre. Like it turned out to be more paranormal than I expected, and the twist that happened did not really make sense. But most disappointingly of all, it really wasn't even about her romance with some weirdo from prison that's sending her letters. It's actually more about her romance with like this random handyman that she meets who's like helping her with the house. So I just feel like the marketing or the blurb that was in the back of the book led me to believe falsely that there would be more interactions between her and this dude from prison. So I do not know yet if I will make a video. That really fumbles my bag a little bit. We'll see. The next question is the biggest surprise for this year for my books. And I am gonna go with this fantasy book that I'm currently reading right now called The Serpent Called Mercy. This is a character-driven epic fantasy novel. One of the ways that you can try to get rid of your dead and earn a bunch of money is if you join this illegal monster fighting arena in order to get just some really quick cash, because there are people that will bet on you to win and defeat these monsters. And so if you get more people betting for you and you defeat these monsters, the more riches you will get in return. So I'm like in the middle of this book so far, and I guess why I am surprised that I'm like keeping up with this book is that I typically find it hard for me to get into adult fantasy novels, and that is because I tend to find them very dense and more focused on like the magic systems or the world buildings, whereas I, with my puny sized brain, like I feel like I'm not as into those things, and I think that kind of writing style bogs me down a lot. It's hard for me to get into it, and that's why it's a surprise for me that like for once I wasn't like dropping a fantasy novel for being like too complex with the writing or too dense for my taste. And I think maybe it's because it is more character driven than I expected, and maybe that's like where I really need to find a fantasy novel that works for me, because I really do love fantasy, and a lot of times when I think of story ideas, they are fantasy, but they're more like low fantasy, and it's more about like the relationships between the characters. But the book does show the main character figuring out how to play this game of politics and deception, like even beyond the actual games of her fighting these monsters with her best friend. You get to see the different creatures that exist out there, so there is still like that very fun adventurous fantasy element where you're discovering all these different monster types that are out there and the different, I guess, races of people that exist. So basically, I am just surprised that maybe I'm growing a little bit more brain cells, because for once I am slowly getting into adult fantasy when that has previously been difficult for me before, which is why I tend to go for YA fantasy. But hey, maybe I'm opening new avenues here. Maybe an old bitch can learn new things after all, who knows? The seventh question is new favorite author, and for that I'm gonna go with Annabelle, who has written The Launch Date. This was her debut for this year. It's a workplace romance, and it is rivals to lovers. Those are the tropes that I don't necessarily would say those are like my favorite. I'm not a girl boss anymore. I reject corporate work culture, and yet this bitch, I say this bitch because I've become friends with her. How dare she romanticize corporate culture? Because now I'm over here twirling my hair and thinking, damn, it would be so cute to have like a work crush now. And also she was able to make the love interest very endearing and charming to me. I don't really go for the archetype of guys that are more, you know, players and socialites, you know, like you telling me he's already rich and has connections and he apparently dates a bunch of women. It's not the type of guy that I would go for. But I feel like she helped make him feel more human and endearing, and I could understand why these characters were falling for each other and like yearning for each other too, because they had a history. And there were just a lot of like scenes that I found to be cute and endearing. There was the famous chapter 25 that, again, I will repeat what I said in my previous video. I think it's a masterclass of sexual tension, building and building upon each other. And this was really a book that made me realize like, damn girl, you really got the chops chops to make a fucking solid rom-com. And so I'm definitely gonna be checking out all of the books that she writes in the future, because I think that there are certain books that you read and you can tell that like an author is very thoughtful and deliberate with the ways that she is developing the characters and the relationships between each other. And I definitely got that impression from reading this book that I very strongly believe will translate over to her other books if she continues to be, you know, very considerate and thoughtful with her work. And then the next one is newest fictional crush and or favorite character. This isn't really like a new fictional crush because I know he's been hot for a very long time, but I think this year I have just come to appreciate him more revisiting him, because obviously that's Itsumi from A Sign of Affection. Again, the hottest anime man to exist in anime history. Not even the shoujo genre, but all anime genres ever. He is so hot. He looks good in any hair color, whether he has black hair, silver hair, whatever. He is respectable to the main girl. He learns sign language just so that he can communicate with her. He is well traveled. He speaks multiple languages. Also in the story, like there's a love triangle going on, but like honestly, you can't even take the love triangle seriously because the other guy, there's no fucking hope for that guy. You know, the main girl doesn't give a shit about him, but Itsumi, the love interest, he gives a shit about the other guy more than she does about him. Because like this guy obviously likes the main girl too. He's like the childhood friend that has the unrequited love. And so, you know, boo-hoo for him. She doesn't give a fuck either way. But Itsumi, like instead of feeling jealous or threatened, he just wants to like be friends with this guy instead. And he's like super chill. He's like, hey, let's have a beer, let's hang out. And he's just so like earnest with it. Question number 9 is, have any books made you cry this year? I haven't really cried from any books. It's very rare for me to do so. I didn't even cry reading Sunrise on the Reaping, even though everyone was like shitting their pants over it. The closest answer I could give you would be like maybe a book that made me the most sad, and that would be a nonfiction book called The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog. It's basically written by a child psychologist. He looks back on these specific stories that have still stayed with him throughout his career. The stories that he talks about are children who have been like genocide survivors, or witnesses to their mom getting murdered, or like teenagers who have been kidnapped, or just things like growing up in a family that was like violent to each other, or even like very small things that, you know, people back then didn't think it would be as impactful as it is, because like they're just a baby that probably won't remember this shit, but like the body remembers, your brain fucking remembers. It just made me so sad to like hear about these stories, because obviously like children are innocent, right? Like they can't help the circumstances and the families that they're born into. And so I felt a lot of sympathy for these children that this author had talked about, and the ways that they've had to recover physically, mentally, emotionally from such devastating circumstances. You read about all these simple things like surroundings, affection, language, touch, and you read about how it drastically impacts your brain. It is so sobering to be like, oh my God, like we really can't fuck this up. You really can't just have a kid for shits and giggles, you know? You really gotta properly take care of the kid. And not enough people know about it. Number 10 is a book that made you happy. Do I really read books that make me happy, or do I just read a bunch of trauma? I would say like the 2 books that come close to that would be A Sign of Affection, because it is such a cute, sweet little story, and The Launch Date, because again, you know, it was a cute rom-com that made me feel like all fluttery. Those were the 2 books I would say gave good vibes to me, as opposed to like sad stories about children being traumatized. And then moving on, the 11th question is most beautiful book that you bought this year. I don't really buy books, and I also haven't really received many books this year. I typically decline books now, like when they're being offered to be sent to me. So I try to think about like what books I did accept to be sent. Maybe I might be missing 1 or 2, but the only one that I can think of to answer the question is Boys with Sharp Teeth, because I had talked about this in my anticipated books of 2025. And so the author was very sweet. She reached out to me after I talked about this book on my channel, and then she had offered to send the book over to me. And so I was like, yeah, sure. And I think I warned her this, because I warn every person that, you know, offers to send me like a copy, especially an advanced copy of anything. I'm very bad at like keeping up with my to read list. And so unfortunately I haven't gotten around to this yet, but I do think that for the story that it is, like a dark academia book that's about like revenge and twisted desire, and it's about like an elite boarding school. The cover, I feel like, definitely fits the vibes here. The main girl basically enters this boarding school because her cousin recently passed in the creek on school property, and she knows that these two guys are the people that are to blame for this. But these two are also the leaders of the school's elite, and so that's why she's like entering this academy and trying to figure out what the fuck is going on, because some shit is shady as hell. But then as she learns more about these boys and the secrets that they're hiding, she learns that there is like a bigger plot afoot here, and I don't know anything more beyond that. And then the last question is, what books do you really need to read by the end of this year? I have talked about the new releases that have come out like in the earlier questions, so I'm going to use this opportunity to talk about books that are currently on hold for me that are not new releases from 2025. So these were books that came out like a couple years ago on the backlist. The first one is a book that I saw in a bookstore called The Atmospherians, and this is about two best friends. One of them is a disgraced influencer and the other is a struggling actor, and these two form a cult that is designed to reform problematic men. I think this book came out in like 2021, but I had not seen it until it was there in the bookstore. The influencer in this book is a woman who became disgraced when she got canceled and doxxed. The juicy part of this is that she was the creator of a wellness brand for women, and I think she does something in this book that got her canceled in the first place and like fired from her job, and now she's stuck in her apartment while men's rights activists are protesting outside. But she has a childhood friend who's the failed actor here, and so he helps her restore her reputation by becoming the face of his new business venture, which is the Atmosphere. And this is a rehabilitation community for men, and this takes place in an abandoned summer camp that is framed as like a workshop for job training, but it's actually a very rigorous program designed to help men get rid of their toxic masculinity. I really don't think this will turn out very well, but I'm curious if it will get juicy. And then the other book that I have, I don't even know if I will get to read it this year because the waitlist for it is several months long. The movie is coming out this year, and so I would like to be able to read it before the movie comes out, but who knows. It is The Long Walk, and the movie adaptation is going to be directed by the same director as The Hunger Games, which makes sense when you know what the premise is. Basically, there's an annual match that happens where 100 boys have to test their stamina and their wits by walking a pace of 4 miles per hour without ever stopping. And the winner gets the prize. Whatever the prize is, I don't know, because I haven't read the book or watched the movie. I would imagine it's a pretty hefty prize, because what do you mean? You gotta walk and walk and walk forever until your feet fucking bleed, and if you stop before others stop, then you die. Like literally, if you watch the trailer, like the boys who can't keep up, they get shot. So this is like a national tournament that happens in America every year. And again, I must emphasize that like there is no finish line. It's literally just walking forever until there's one last man standing. You can't receive any help from the outside. You can't slow down under the speed limit. There's just so much high stakes, and I am very curious about how the story will go. So that wraps up the mid-year freak out / check-in tag, however you want to call it. I hope that I have brought up some books that might interest you. Gorgeous covers, juicy plots. I will be very well occupied during my commute, indeed. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. I think my next videos will be more like drama related videos in the book community or publishing industry. So speaking of juicy plots, maybe we will dive further into that. But until then, goodbye.